If we have time, we'll go into the Rebbe the Minor. I first want to speak about Teves. Today is a very special day. Teves, which is the Hilula, the Yahrtzeit of the Rebbe, passed on this day. And I first want to tell you about the history of what happened, and then explain a little bit about the meaning of a Yahrtzeit from a Hasidic perspective, which is different than the way we understand the Yahrtzeit from the general perspective, and from the way we understand it even from the Torah perspective, but from the Nigla, from the revealed part of Torah. And this is more from the hidden part of Torah. Before we go into the details, the general idea is that from the hidden part of Torah, a day of passing for a tzaddik, really any person, but especially a tzaddik, is not a sad day, but it's actually an exceptionally great spiritual day. But again, that's from the Hasidic perspective. And where this is obvious is that everyone knows Lag BaOmer is a day of great celebration. Different communities have different customs, but the place where this is celebrated the most is in Hasidic communities and in Sephardic communities. And the reason is because Lag BaOmer is the passing of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. He's the author of the Zohar, which is the inner esoteric part of Torah. And both Sephardic Jews and Hasidic Jews are very connected to the more mystical part of Torah. And what happens on Lag BaOmer, in general, the custom of the Yahrtzeit is people fast on that day and do things which sort of represent the sadness of the day. With Reb Shimon Bar Yochai is the opposite. It's dancing and singing and celebrating. In fact, the word Yom Hilula in Aramaic means a wedding, like you celebrate like a wedding, which is bizarre. We're talking about the day that someone passed away, and especially a tzaddik. So I'll try to go into that a little bit later. First, the history of this day. What caused the Alter Rebbe should pass away? The Alter Rebbe was actually relatively young. He was 68 years old. And he passed away because of certain circumstances at that time. The circumstances was that at the time there was a war raging between France and Russia, Napoleon and the Tsar. It basically means Napoleon came to invade Russia and conquer Russia. And there was a debate amongst the tzaddikim in the generation. What should we pray for? What should we want? They were both not great tzaddikim. Not the Tsar was a tzaddik, and not Napoleon was a tzaddik. But the question was, which was be worse? So the Alter Rebbe was determined that the Tsar wins the war. And there were other tzaddikim that were determined that Napoleon wins the war. And the reason behind it was Napoleon was a liberal thinker. He was open-minded, so to speak, and they brought down, the king of France. The revolution. It wasn't just a revolution in terms of fighting a certain authority. It was an idealistic revolution. Revolution against the idea of any kind of restrictions, anybody telling us what to do. But not only against kings, even against Hashem, no God, He didn't believe in God, didn't believe in religion, but didn't believe in anything spiritual. And he was an extremely arrogant person. And he, in fact, it says that a lot of the ideas in the world today that are liberal ideas, they come from what he established in his time. That's where it all started. So the Alter Rebbe said that if he would win the war, then in a certain sense, because he's more open-minded and liberal-minded, the Jews would have it easier begashmius. They'd have more privileges, they'd be able to earn money, they'd be able to have wealth, and that would be a good thing. But what happens spiritually is they would lose them, they would get lost in terms of spirituality. They would lose their connection to Hashem, to Torah, to mitzvahs, and it would lead to assimilation. The other Rebbes were more focused on the fact that it would be so much better for the Jews physically, and apparently they didn't see the danger spiritually. So the Alter Rebbe said that in the heavenly court, it was ruled that whoever blows the shofar first on Rosh Hashanah will have it his way. In fact, there was another tzaddik, it seems he was like at the head of the other opinion. It's not clear who it was, but I think most people believe it was a tzaddik who was by the name of Rabbi Yisrael Kozhnitzer, the Kozhnitzer Maggid, a big Hasidic Rebbe. In fact, he used to call him the second Baal Shem Tov, because the miracle that he performed was so out of this world that he was compared to the Baal Shem Tov himself. So that was the deal. Whoever blows shofar first, he will be successful in having things where he wants them to be. So what happened was that the other tzaddik got up as early as he possibly can, did something which he never does. He davened as fast as he can, and he took the shofar to blow it. Then he said, too late. The Alter Rebbe got me, ahead of me. How did that happen? If you get up as early as you can, you daven as quick as you can. How did the Alter Rebbe beat him? The Alter Rebbe did something different. He got up as early as he can, and he blew shofar before davening. So he was ahead. Everyone's dedicated a whole sikh on this idea that sometimes you have to blow shofar before davening, what this means in a broader meaning. So the Alter Rebbe said that Napoleon wasn't just a very powerful, charismatic person. He was much worse than that. He was a sorcerer. He had powers of black magic. And apparently that's how was effective in what he did in conquering different places. But the Alter Rebbe said that he was the sort of the supreme klipa of that generation, the biggest klipa of the generation. And therefore, he did not want to be under his jurisdiction even for one moment. So when word came out that Napoleon is approaching Russia and coming near the area where the Alter Rebbe was, which was a city called Lozhne, the Alter Rebbe left the city just for that reason. He didn't want to be under his jurisdiction, and he took many families with him, his personal family and other chassidim. I think they say there was like 60 wagons traveling, and they all ran away from Lozhne, not knowing where they're going, but they're leaving Russia. They were also fortunate that the Russian army provided them with protection, with soldiers to protect them. Why would the Russian army do that? So the answer is, because not only did the Alter Rebbe do whatever needs to be done spiritually in order to see that Napoleon should lose and the Tsar should win, but he also did things begashmius. And one of the things that he did was, I think you know this part of the story, that he appointed a chassid, whose name was Moshe Meislish, that he should be a spy and give over information to the Russian army. So Rabbi Majeski was one of the biggest chassidim of the Alter Rebbe, one of the biggest, and he lived in a place which is the border, close to the border of Russia and France, and because of that, he knew both languages. And in such situations, you need translators, you need interpreters, people who know both languages. So he offered his services, and they accepted him to translate documents or interpret discussions or whatever. But in the meantime, he had his ears open and he had his eyes open, and anything that he saw that could be of substance, he would find a way through certain channels to get the information over to the Russian army. We don't know a lot of details because, of course, all these things were top secret. But one of the details which we do know is a story that in Russia, they had this building which was a storage house for weapons. A lot of weapons were there. And the whole storage house was blown up to pieces. And somehow they were able to throw a hand grenade, a bomb or whatever it is inside, which blew up, and all the ammunition that they had there was destroyed. Of course, it was a big loss for them. Anyway, he found out how this happened. And not only how it happened, but their French army is planning to do this in different places around Russia. What happened was that two drunk Russians were having a fight not far from that place, which is nothing unusual in Russia. To be drunk isn't unusual, and to get into a fight is not unusual. And as they were fighting, one of them picked up a rock and he threw it at the other one. He missed. Supposedly, he just missed, but really it was intentional. And he threw it and broke a window. Once that was open, someone else came along and threw something in, and the whole place blew up. And that was a beautiful plan. And the plan was to do this in more places. He gave over the information. And then sure enough, in another place in Russia, two guys who were drunk started to have a fight near the weapons storage place. They arrested him immediately and found out that this is part of a plan. When the French army found out about this, they were in shock. This was a top secret. Only the top generals knew about this. Clearly, they knew the plan in advance. How did they figure it out? Somebody must be a spy, but they didn't know who to accuse. They were suspicious of everyone. No one suspected it would be the chassid. Chassid, the white long beard, like what does he know? What is he? He's writing his things. He has no idea. But one day, as they were sitting in a room making their plans, the other end of the room, he was sitting and translating and listening to their plans. All of a sudden, the door opens up, flies open, and Napoleon walks in. Napoleon himself walks in. And as soon as he sees the chassid, he says, "What are you doing here?" And the next words that came out of his mouth is, "You're the spy that they're looking for." And the next thing he did was he put his hand on his heart to see how fast his heart was beating. Because if a person is lying, if a person is guilty, the heart will beat much faster than if it would be innocent, which is very similar to a lie detector test that we do here in America and probably other countries. So the chassid said that the Aleph base of Chassidus that the Alter Rebbe taught us is that the mind controls the heart. And that saved my life. My mind controlled my heart, that the heartbeat should be regular, as if nothing is happening. And when he saw that, he just took his hand away and like this guy doesn't have a clue. Because the truth is, even if you're totally innocent, but if Napoleon would suspect you and accuse you of being a spy, everybody's heart would be beating. So the fact that it wasn't racing at all, it was just normal heartbeats, meant that this guy has no clue what we're talking about, and therefore he's definitely innocent. But that actually saved his life. So this is a very high level of a chassid practicing what the Alter Rebbe taught, that the heart is controlled by the mind, and the mind can actually dictate to the heart to relax, and that's what happened. So when the Alter Rebbe ran away, after traveling for a number of miles, the Alter Rebbe said that he has to go back. So they dispatched one wagon with a few soldiers to protect him, and Alter Rebbe went back. What did he want? He sent in the chassid to go into the house and look if any item was left there. And he came back, he found one item, he found slippers. Then the Alter Rebbe asked that they put the house on fire and burn it down. What was the reason? Because Alter Rebbe said that Napoleon is a sorcerer. And if he would have in his hand an object that belongs to the Alter Rebbe, with his power of sorcery, he could, God forbid, attempt to do damage to the Alter Rebbe. So therefore, he didn't want anything to be left there. And he wanted the house to be burned down in case he would find something, there's nothing to find anymore. And they say that sure enough, when Napoleon did come into the town, the first thing he asked was, where is the home of the Alter Rebbe? He called him Rabbi Baruchovich. That was the Alter Rebbe's legal last name. And when he saw the fire was out, he tried to extinguish the fire, but it was impossible. Then he offered, I think, a gold coin, a very big amount of money. Whoever in town can bring him an item that they have from the Alter Rebbe, they'll pay them a lot of money. And nobody came with it. But this was who we're dealing with. He wasn't just a general and later the head of France, but he was actually a sorcerer, and he was sort of the clip of that generation. At the point that he was, when he went into Russia, which was it was the fear that now he's going to conquer Russia. The Alter Rebbe told the Chassidim he's not going to conquer. You'll see, he's going into Russia. Eventually, it's going to be impossible for him to last over there. I think the reason was that because of they weren't prepared for the Russian weather, the cold, and that's how they were dying out. And the Russians defeated them, and they had to retreat. But initially, they went into Russia. The Alter Rebbe asked, sing to me the March of Victory that they sang when they went into Russia. And they sang a march, which is the famous march, which we know today, which is called Napoleon's March. And the one that we sing, Yom Kippur, after Yom Kippur is over. The Alter Rebbe said, this is a true march of victory, but ultimately would be Didan Natzach. In fact, the whole family of the Alter Rebbe, they were all hysterical, they were all panicking, and they went into Russia, and the Alter Rebbe so much needed to convince them. That's what it says. The Alter Rebbe was wearing his tefillin, and he made a shvuah, which is very unusual. He took an oath, and he said that he swears that he's going to have his downfall, and he'll retreat, and Russia will win the war. And that's what happened at the end. There's also another incident that happened, was that the Alter Rebbe was the second wagon of this caravan of wagons, and the wagon of the Russian soldiers, they were the first. But the Alter Rebbe gave instructions which direction to go. In the Alter Rebbe's wagon, one of his grandchildren were there. His name was Rabbi Nachum. He was the son of the Mitzvah Rebbe. And he gave over the Alter Rebbe's messages. We should go to the right, go to the left, stop, move. Sometimes the Alter Rebbe himself would walk out, lean on his cane and look here and there, and then say, we're going to go to the right, or we're going to go to the left. So at one point, the Alter Rebbe told him to go through a certain direction. They're traveling. And then the Alter Rebbe says to his grandson, did we pass this and this village yet? So the grandson goes, oi, I took the wrong road. I misunderstood what you said. And the Alter Rebbe gave a deep sigh. And he said, fortunate is the grandfather that the grandson follows his path. How unfortunate it is when the grandfather has to follow the grandson's path. And Alter Rebbe concluded, he said that he knew that if they reach a certain spot before Rosh Hashanah, then things will be better. And if they don't reach that spot before Rosh Hashanah, it won't be. And ultimately, the Chassidim understood, or he understood, that meant, when the Alter Rebbe was nostalgic, passed away, that had they reached that spot before Rosh Hashanah, then the Alter Rebbe wouldn't have passed away. But Hashgacha Pratis, he misunderstood, they went down the wrong road, and that's what happened. So technically, even though of course everything is spiritual and heavenly, we just had a minor, that even a blade of grass, the way it moves is from Shemayim, certainly something like this. But in Derech HaTeva, the natural reason why the Alter Rebbe was nostalgic, because they were traveling on the road, during the cold, freezing winter days and nights in Russia. And from that, the Alter Rebbe got sick. I don't know if it says exactly what illness it was, but it wasn't for very long. He got sick from the cold, and then he was nostalgic. Where was he nostalgic? He was nostalgic in an inn. They stayed in an inn, which was in a village called Piena. You look at Hayom Yom today, you'll see it was in a village called Piena. The innkeeper was not a Jew, but he accommodated the Alter Rebbe and he accommodated the Chassidim. And the Alter Rebbe passed away. Why am I telling you this? Because there's also an amazing story connected to that. And that is that there was once the story of two people told the story how they became Chassidim, the Alter Rebbe. They were businessmen, they traveled a lot, and they were frum people, came from frum homes, kept Torah and mitzvahs. But because of the travels, especially in those days, where you can't order a pizza on Amazon, they needed kosher food, they needed other kosher things. And when you're traveling, you can't get things. And they started to be more relaxed about halacha here and there. And it was so relaxed as it goes with these things, one thing leads to the next. They stopped doing this, they stopped doing that. And eventually they stopped keeping mitzvahs completely, stopped keeping kosher completely. And they became non-religious over the years. They came to this inn, and the innkeeper said to them, I see that you gentlemen are Jewish, so you want specifically only kosher food? So they said, no, it doesn't really make a difference, whatever you have. So they're waiting for the food. Instead of food, the guy comes back with two huge burly men. They have in their hands hammers and hatchets and chains. And they say, you think you came to an inn, but actually this is a place for where thieves, and we're going to kill you and take away all the money you have. And thank you for coming here. And of course, they started to plead with them. We'll give you all our money. They just don't let us live. They said, no, we can't do that. We know that if we do that, the next thing we know, the police are going to be here. We have no choice. We can give you a little bit of time before it happens so you can think about things. And if you want, you can go into this room here. I'll lock the door and we'll be back in a few hours. Of course, they went into the room and they were hysterical. What are they going to do? They can't do anything. And they started to talk. As Jews, they started to speak amongst themselves. It's probably because it's happening to us because of what we did. We shouldn't have, stopped eating kosher, stopped keeping Shabbos. They were crying and amongst themselves. They realized they have to do tshuva. And then after a while, they hear footsteps. Obviously, the guy is coming. They're waiting for the last moment. He opens up the door. There's a big smile on his face, a tray of food. Puts the food down, and they're like in shock, like, are we dreaming? What's going on? And he said to them, eat, relax, you're safe. I'm not a thief. I'll explain what I did in just a moment. Of course, they took time for them to relax. And he told them the following. He said, in this inn, there was once a very great rabbi, a righteous man that passed away. In fact, he passed away in this room that you're here. And since he passed away, I closed the room. I don't let anybody use the room. If Jews come here, I tell them they want, they can go in and pray there. And a great righteous man passed away here. And that's all I used it for, but I didn't use it for other things. Before he passed away, this was 10 years earlier, he told me, if two Jews, I'm asking for a favor, if two Jews come to your inn, and they tell you it doesn't matter if they're eating kosher or not kosher, please do anything you can to make them do tshuva. So he said, I forgot about it completely. Some people say the Alter Rebbe told him that the door is going to squeak and that's going to remind you. And the door squeaked, that was his reminder. Or just the fact that they said it doesn't matter, and he remembered. And therefore, he staged himself and his children as if they were thieves. And once he heard that they were doing tshuva, he realized the mission accomplished. When they asked who the person is, he told them that he's buried not far from here in a city called Hadich. That's where the Alter Rebbe is buried. And they went to Hadich, and they, of course, thanked the Alter Rebbe. And I think from there on, they went and became Chassidim of the Alter Rebbe. Just to give a little bit of an insight, what it says in Tanya and what it says in Kabbalah, why a day like this is such a special day. And this is one reason amongst many. But there are two chapters in Tanya with the Alter Rebbe, not in the first volume, but in volume 4, where the Alter Rebbe devotes towards explaining this. And the Alter Rebbe explains how a tzaddik throughout his lifetime accomplishes so many things spiritually, Torah, mitzvahs, and of course everything he does goes up to Shemayim, and everything that he accomplishes brings blessing from Shemayim down here. But everything that tzaddik does during his lifetime doesn't completely go up to Shemayim until the last day of his life. On that day, which is the last day of his life, everything he did since the first day that he was born, that day it all ascends higher and higher, and therefore its full, complete impact on the world only happens on that day. And what's the connection? What's the explanation? The explanation is that up until that point, the neshama is limited by the body. And therefore, all the activities of the neshama and everything the neshama does and everything the neshama has accomplished is also limited because it's done through the body. Once the limitations of the body are removed, then the neshama is no longer limited, and all the things the neshama did take on an unlimited dimension. So therefore, it has an impact on the world on that day, which is much, much more than anything that it had an impact the entire life of the tzaddik. That's what happened in that year. What about today? So again, Chassidus explains that whatever happens the first time, every single year when the date comes around, it's repeated. It happens again and again and again. And not only again, but every year, whatever happened the first time, the next year on that date, it reoccurs in a much stronger way. Because every year that goes by, the tzaddik is less limited than the year before. When we say the tzaddik goes higher and higher spiritually also means less limited. Less limited, so everything he did has even a greater impact than what it had the year before. And that means that to a certain extent, it's the opposite of I would think. One would think, okay, it's so many years since Alter Rebbe was nostalgic. It's over 200 years. So whatever impact that had on the world is like 200 years weaker. According to Chassidus and Kabbalah, is the opposite. That whatever effect it had, it's now 200 times stronger than it was the first original time. So that's why it's considered a special day, a day we add and give it tzedakah. We learn something from the Alter Rebbe, which is easy to learn anything from Tanya. It's a day of Farbrengens. And a day that the Alter Rebbe, of course, is misfollow for every single person that has a connection to him, which are all the people that study his Svarim, follow in his path, and so on. One of the things that the Rebbe pointed out, and one of the last sikhs that the Rebbe ever said, was that people ask, where in the world do we see today that we're close to Mashiach? We talk about Mashiach, but people ask, Mashiach is not only for the Yidden, Mashiach is for the whole world. When you look around outside, where do you see any kind of indication that we're anywhere closer to Mashiach than before? And the Rebbe gave a long explanation. It's the Sikha of Vayeshev, Tavshinun Beis. But then the Rebbe said, if you look around in the world, you see these and these changes. But we know that even though the changes are taking place globally, but there's one country where those changes are so much more pronounced than other countries. And which country is it? Tsarfas, France. The Rebbe brought a pasuk, which shows that Tsarfas, which is France, is connected to the union of Galus and Gula more than other countries. What do we see in France? There was a look at the difference between France then and France now. The Alter Rebbe ran away from France, didn't move from France, from Napoleon, ran away to the extent that he put his life in danger not to be in the presence of where Napoleon is. And not only he put his life at risk, he actually lost his life. Again, technically, that was the reason why the Alter Rebbe became sick and lost his life, because he didn't want to be where Napoleon was. In fact, the next Rebbe, the Mitzvah Rebbe, never traveled to France, even though he traveled to different places. Yahrtzeit never traveled to France. The first Rebbe to travel to France was the Rebbe Marash. Traveled there, did some things there, and came back. The Rebbe Rashab already did more. He traveled to France. In fact, there's a mimer which is known as Ayin Beis. This is considered, in some sense, the crown jewel of all the Maimarim of the Rebbe Rashab. It has 140 Maimarim. Ayin Beis is the deepest of the Rebbe Rashab Maimarim. But where did he sort of lay down the foundation for that Maimer? Dafka in France. He was in France, and he was in a place where they took the opportunity there to work on a certain subject of Chassidus, and that became the cornerstone of that big, long Maimer. And then the Frierdiker Rebbe already came to France much more often, and the Frierdiker Rebbe said Maimarim there. And the Rebbe, we know, spent a lot of years in France. And even though it looked like there was this reason and that reason why the Rebbe was there, but from the Rebbe's Sikha, looking at Sikha, it's pretty clear that all this was a process of transforming France. And we see that it was gradual. The Alter Rebbe ran away from France. The Mitzvah Rebbe Tzemach Tzedek didn't go near France. The Rebbe Marash was a little bit, the Rebbe Rashab a little more, the Frierdiker Rebbe more, and the Rebbe so much more. Now France is a country where there's Yiddishkeit, there's Torah, there's mitzvahs, there's Chassidus coming from there, and it's totally transformed in a way like it wasn't in those days. So here we look at a certain country and we compare the way it's now, the way it's before, and we see how this country, which was like such a klippa and so much not a vessel for godliness, in general, France was known for a very immodest place, and religious, God-fearing Jews stayed away from there. But here, and I guess all this began with Napoleon. And here we find that this became a place which is a source for Torah, for Yiddishkeit, for mitzvahs, so many yeshivas that are there, and so on. And this is also connected to the fact that the Rebbe took the national anthem of France and made a Chassidish Shenidim with the words Aderes Mamuna. It looks like it was all part of the process of transforming France as a preparation for Geula. I don't know if this was mentioned in the previous classes, but we see the Hashgacha Pratis that the Rambam's Yom Hilula and the Alter Rebbe's Yom Hilula are very close to each other. The Rambam was nostalgic on the 20th of Teves, the Alter Rebbe on the 24th. And there's a sikh where the Rebbe makes at least 12 points paralleling the Alter Rebbe and the Rambam. But I'll just mention three things mainly. One thing is that the Alter Rebbe and the Rambam were both masters of halacha. The Alter Rebbe wrote the Shulchan Aruch. The Rambam was the first one to write the whole idea of a halacha, set of svarim on halacha. That was the Rambam's innovation, first one. The second thing is that the Alter Rebbe, of course, is a shining light in Chassidus. And even though the Rambam didn't write Chassidus, he wrote a book called Moreh Nevuchim, which is a deep philosophical understanding of Torah and mitzvahs to guide the perplexed, that people should have a deeper understanding of Yiddishkeit and Torah and mitzvahs. And the third thing, which is striking, is just like the Alter Rebbe had opposition, and people came out against him. The Tanya was burned publicly because people said that it's sort of not kosher. And in the end, we know that today we're living in a time with all the Alter Rebbe's Sfarim, the Shulchan Aruch, the Tanya is accepted by the whole world, is respected by the whole world, and people learn it and follow it. Same as with the Rambam. The Rambam, initially people came out against him, and they said that his writings go against Torah. And they actually, so we're not talking ordinary people, great people, gave a ruling that his Spartan should be burned publicly. And eventually they came to realize that it was a big mistake. And the Rambam is really a great tzaddik. And we see now not just a great tzaddik, but we're talking about a tzaddik at a different level completely than your average person, even your average tzaddik. And he became the source of halacha for future generations. So we see that the shlichus of the Rambam and the shlichus of the Alter Rebbe have a certain similarity to it. And even though the Rambam doesn't write anything about Chassidus, there's a debate, did the Rambam know Kabbalah or not? Some say the Rambam didn't study Kabbalah, didn't know Kabbalah, he doesn't bring anything from Kabbalah. The Rebbes of Chabad have a tradition amongst them from Rebbe to Rebbe that the Rambam was actually a giant in Kabbalah, but in his generation, it was dangerous to reveal Kabbalah. And there's a person who printed a sefer, and in his sefer, he brings, I forgot how many quotes from the Rambam, that he quotes sources of Chazal, but the only source for what he quotes is in Zohar, which obviously means that he had the knowledge of Kabbalah. Okay. You're very welcome. Okay. Thank you.